Hi, this is Ginny from Ginny Music. Today we're going to talk about working with the homeschool community, looking at ways, strategies to connect with the homeschool community and teach students there. Hopefully you will come away with a greater understanding of how homeschooling works. I'm going to speak specifically to homeschooling in Pennsylvania. It varies from state to state and definitely country to country. So I'm coming at it from the perspective of a Pennsylvania resident. As a private music instructor, it's helpful to be able to have an understanding of how homeschooling works when you talk to your students who homeschool or parents of those homeschoolers. If you understand how it works, what their objectives are, what homeschooling looks like, then it's easier to even just hold a conversation about them. You know what kinds of things to ask. Will hopefully have more confidence in your conversation with them. It won't seem like such a foreign, awkward thing. I also am hoping to help you create opportunities specifically for homeschoolers in your studio. There's some really great opportunities there that you don't get with kids who are in traditional school settings. And finally, I'm going to show you some ways that you can reach the homeschool community through co-ops and things like that, where it's outside of your studio or even bringing them into your studio. But there's some really fantastic opportunities for you to reach a larger group of homeschoolers. I wonder what you know about homeschooling coming into this. I wonder if there's any misconceptions you might have. A lot of people say things like, well, the stereotypes they hear are that homeschoolers are socially awkward, or homeschoolers, I heard at this conference I was presented this at this past weekend, somebody said that they had the impression that homeschoolers were not really college ready by the time they graduated high school, which I thought that was interesting. That was totally opposite of my experience. But I think in the last 15 years, that has really shifted. So perhaps 20 years when they had experience with a homeschooler, that was more common. Now I find that most homeschoolers are well on their way in college, even before they graduate. The biggest misconception that I had about homeschooling, I pictured homeschooling looking like a parent and a child sitting at their table, at a table or a desk at their kitchen or in their schoolroom every day, and the parent sitting next to the child and teaching the child just like a school teacher would do. That I know now is really far from how it really works. So I used to view homeschooling as kind of scary and complicated and a lot of responsibility, but I found it's actually much simpler than that. It comes down to two main things, at least to get started. You need to file an affidavit with your school district. Well, in the beginning of the year, you have to submit objectives for what you hope to accomplish with your student that year. And then at the end, you have an evaluation with a certified teacher that comes to you as an evaluator. Some people do it over Zoom. You pay them for a session. They look over your child's portfolio, which is just a sample of the things they have learned and worked on, their homework, their assignments over the year. Maybe they look at your curriculum and they do a brief evaluation, and then they fill out a form and they submit that to the school district. That's it. So the two big pieces are the affidavit and objectives that you submit in the beginning of the year as a parent, and then the evaluation that you submit for the evaluator at the end of this school year. In America, homeschooling is a right as long as the documentation required by law and the school district per the district school board policy is submitted. The school district's approval is not required. In Pennsylvania, this is how it works. The Department of Education determines all of the rights and responsibilities. If you go to the Pennsylvania Department of Education website and go to the Home Education Programs page, they outline everything that you need to know to get started. You'll see they have everything from how to submit an affidavit and how to, what classes you need, how to handle immunizations, standardized testing, students with disabilities, how to maintain a portfolio, evaluations, and finding an evaluator. So many things. All the information you really need to get started is right there on the Department of Education's website. There is a list there of mandatory classes. And as music educators, we want to pay particular attention to music requirements. So in elementary school, music is a requirement, and in secondary school, music is a requirement. Now, in neither of these places does it specify how much music or what that looks like. That's really largely up to the supervisor of the home education program, which is typically the parent. So they're given a lot of leeway as to what that needs to look like, but the students should include music as part of their education. So this is a huge opportunity for us as music educators. One common thread that you'll see in the homeschool community generally is that the parents are very deliberate and intentional about their children's education. So we have here a whole demographic group of people that are looking for specialists to help educate their child. So here are the basic ways that people can do it. Private one-on-one lessons. A lot of my students, my private one-on-one students, are homeschoolers, and I speak to a lot of people, and that's the case for them too. A lot of teachers are trying to figure out how to get homeschoolers. The main reason people want homeschoolers is because you can teach during the school day. You're not limited to teaching from 3 to 8 or 9 p.m. Just to give you a little bit of an education on how this works. Every credit is about 120 hours. So one high school credit is 120 hours of instruction or work on that subject. So I would say roughly 40 hours of lessons plus a couple hours of practice per week is sufficient to count as one credit. So if you have a student that is studying with you for a year, that easily counts as one credit. If you think about it in the perspective of school, the amount of time that's wasted, or transitions, or the teacher's out and there's a sub, or they watch a movie one day, or just the time that is spent in people getting their supplies or waiting for the class to be quiet and the teacher to get started. It's not really 120 hours of instruction and work. That's the goal, about 120 hours. Elementary school ages don't require a specific amount of time. It's more about exposure to these concepts and skills. Parent-taught lessons. That can get the job done. Sometimes there's parents who are like, I played whatever instrument, especially piano, and they're like, I'm just going to teach my child, and that's going to be part of our school day. And that works. Unless the child really starts to excel, then they'll often try to find a real teacher for that child. Sometimes creative parents, moms typically, will collaborate to do a subject together to make it more enjoyable for their children and for themselves. The social dynamic can be very motivating and just make it more enjoyable, kind of hold them accountable too. So sometimes families will join together for music time and do a variety of activities. Online music classes and lessons. We've used this a bit. My daughter in, I think, 9th grade did this Coursera course, which is like an online college class without the credit, and they're free. They're called MOOCs. She did Yale's Introduction to Classical Music, and that was fantastic. It really made a difference in her life. I still see it in the things she says and the music she listens to. It really gave her an appreciation for classical music. I know a lot of people use OutSchool both as teachers and for their children, familiar with Just Teach online, and they usually do group lessons or group classes on OutSchool. Co-ops and learning groups, that is kind of my sweet spot, particularly as a classroom educator. I have my degree in music ed and master's degree in Kodai. And I love teaching in the co-ops and homeschool in the larger group settings. So a huge benefit for me is just being able to teach outside the box, just really do different creative things than if I was in definitely a public school and even a private school setting. I'll get more into that later. Group lessons. This is something I have developed a little bit more just in the last few years in my home, mostly ukulele. I'll do ukulele group lessons for homeschoolers, and that's been really enjoyable, and I feel like that's been a successful way to reach more kids, and it's at a lower cost typically to the parents. Then public or private school classes and clubs. So public schools in Pennsylvania are required by law to allow homeschoolers to participate in their curricular and extracurricular activities. There are limits. You can't take 8 classes a day or 7 classes a day. You wouldn't be a homeschooler. But for example, in our school district, homeschoolers can take 2 classes per semester for no charge, no fee. So it just means you have to transport them back and forth, but that's an option. People can use the music program in the public school. Private schools often have the same allowances. However, you have to pay a fee to participate. So my family's homeschooling experience, we have 5 children. I always say, yeah, we homeschool, but not really. I'm kind of an imposter. So remember what I said about my preconceived notion about mom teaching everything? That's, I think, what a lot of people expect when they ask, oh, you homeschool your kids? That is not me at all. So this is my family. I have 5 kids. We have 5 kids. The oldest is 20. The youngest is now 12. And this is a picture from the coolest thing we've ever done. It was a road trip out west for a couple weeks, and we hiked the Grand Canyon rim to rim. It was fun. My husband and I did that on our honeymoon. And down at the bottom of the canyon, I was like, someday I want to come back with our tribe of kids and do this again. So 20 some years later, we did it with our kids, and it was a fantastic time. So with our 5 children, we have used a total of 5 different schooling methods. We've done private school, we've done public school, we've done a 1-room micro school for elementary, we've done a 1-room micro school for middle school, and during COVID, we did true homeschooling. We've utilized just as many methods for music education. We've done private lessons with a couple different teachers, we've done some different co-ops, things like that. The thing I'm going to emphasize is in the homeschool community, word of mouth spreads fast. A lot of homeschool families utilize, or they really depend on each other to help find good resources. In my private studio, more recently, I've been creating more classes for homeschoolers. There's not really much difference between the classes that I teach for homeschoolers than regular kids, but I have found that homeschoolers are much more likely to continue sequential sessions. So for example, if I do a ukulele class, beginner ukulele class for homeschoolers, I did level 1 for 6 to 8 weeks, and then they're like, oh, we like it, let's keep going. So I do a level 2 and keep going, do a level 3, keep going, do a level 4, and we shift to like songwriting, things like that. I find that children who are in public school, their afternoons tend to get full with something else in a different season of their life, and it's harder for them to commit to a longer term thing like that. Whereas during the day, as part of their homeschool curriculum, I've had a lot of success with continued courses. Something to keep in mind, homeschoolers are as diverse as regular schoolers. But here are some generalizations based on the feedback I gathered in some Facebook groups and from my own experience too. But I asked other people like, hey, what has your experience been with teaching homeschoolers? And these are some things that I found across the board, generalizations. Some advantages of teaching homeschoolers. They tend to be disciplined and motivated. Not always, but generally, they have the time built into their day for music practice, and they are taking it seriously. Daytime lessons are definitely an advantage. I do say I found that most homeschool families protect their mornings, and they tend to stay home in the morning and get their schoolwork done that they need to do, kind of their core classes, and then they save the afternoons for more elective type interest-based learning. So I tend to, even with my homeschoolers, tend to do more afternoon. Multiple siblings, not always true, but again, a stereotype. Homeschoolers often have several children, and they will often all do piano lessons or ukulele class or things like that. So you often get several students in one shot. I've found, and other people have found, homeschoolers to be a little more flexible because they have the time generally because their kids are not in school all day. And homeschoolers are amazing networkers. Once you have one homeschool family, the word will spread. There are some challenges or disadvantages. I always tell my kids, every rose has its thorns. The same applies here. Some things that people have told me about is sometimes it can be frustrating. Extended travel is more common, and not during the summer months so much. Homeschoolers often tend to do their vacations either before Memorial Day or after Labor Day when the beaches or Disney or whatever is not so crowded. That's part of the benefit of homeschooling. You can hit the off season for your vacations. So if you have a very strict makeup policy or you things like that can sometimes be challenging. You might have to work with them a little bit. Some people have found that homeschoolers are more frugal, less likely to pay full price or be able or willing to pay. Some homeschoolers, they're footing the bill for their education, at least in most states. So they kind of have a limited budget of what they can spend on their children's education. So sometimes they have those constraints. One thing I have found to be really fun and useful is bartering. I don't do it so much now, but when my children were young, I bartered everything from horseback riding lessons. I would teach my friends' kids piano lessons while she took my kids outside at her house and gave them horseback riding lessons. We would barter meals. I had for a while, a woman came and I was teaching her 3 kids, and she would bring dinner and finish and prepare dinner while I was teaching. That was fantastic. Cleaning, gardening, taxes, you name it, it can be done. So that's a way that you can sometimes make it work. Find something that's a win. It can be a disadvantage that some families expect flexibility. The flexibility can be advantageous or it can be a disadvantage. And the multiple siblings can be great, or it can be a problem because while you're teaching one, what are the other ones doing? That can be a problem for some people. So here is how I've shifted now to teaching as a classroom homeschool music educator. I've been doing that for about 15 or so years and still doing it. I just finished at one co-op that I had been, I think, for 15 or 16 years. This has been also where my children got a consistent music education. My favorite part of this is just being creative in how I teach, doing things really differently. Some of the highlights were I did an elementary musical every other year for the elementary kids did the musical, but then my secondary students were the kind of like the pit, the band for it, and accompanied the whole musical. I would basically transcribe the musical for chord and for like a band instruments. I'd make chord charts, things like that. And that was fantastic. Another one of my favorites was this last year I did a secondary musical instrument petting zoo class. So we spent each class was spent on a different group of instruments, whether it be bowed string instruments or plucked string instruments or brass instruments, percussion, keyboard, electronic, woodwinds, so forth and so on. And then at the end, they each created their own personalized instrument. That was a lot of fun. So there are a variety of models for cooperative learning for these homeschool co-ops. There's a lot of ways, different places in the country, different communities will do it differently. The biggest difference I see that right away sets them apart is drop-off versus parent-attended. So the parents drop the children off in the beginning of the day and then come pick them up when it's over. Others require that a parent attends and usually stays on campus and usually serves in some capacity. The next difference I see is sometimes there's a set schedule when you enroll, let's say as a 3rd grader, all 3rd graders do this schedule and these classes, whereas some others have everything a la carte. They have a lot of classes that you can pick from and you can pick and choose which classes you want to take, and you can take a full load every hour or you can just come for one class. Another difference I often find is some have volunteer teachers, usually parents, and others pay teachers to come in and teach. Oftentimes the co-ops that use paid teachers have more highly qualified teachers, but that's not always the case. Religious versus secular, some are very faith-based and will have, for example, participants or teachers sign a statement of faith. Others purposefully and intentionally avoid any religious affiliation. Some have multiple grades all grouped together in ages according to the interests by subject, and then others are single grade or very set grades. So it's only 4th graders in this class, whereas some have, 4th through 8th graders mixed, whoever wants to be in that class. Some co-ops have a more academic focus and are a little more rigorous, and some are more social. And it's about community and giving the students opportunities for friendships and social interaction. Some have a just general focus, and then some learning groups or co-ops have a very specific focus, such as the arts or STEM, things like that. So here are some tips for teaching homeschoolers in a co-op setting. There's some things that I've learned over the years to watch for. First is find out how the group handles behavior issues and discipline, what they want you to do for any behavioral issues. Find out if you should assign homework. Ones that have a little bit more of a social and community focus might not want or even be willing to do homework. That the students might be very resistant to that. Whereas some, if they're really counting on you to fulfill that whole 120-hour credit, they might request or assume that you're going to give them enough work to do some things the other 4 days of the week. Write clear lesson plans that you can reuse, even if it's your first year. Write it down somewhere where you can modify it and write notes afterwards. This is kind of what I do. I just give a list of materials, write some concepts, and then just outline the different activities I'll be doing. Develop a long-term plan with rotating courses, because if you end up staying there long-term, every couple years you can reuse your courses. It's not like a public school, though, where you write a lesson plan and you teach it again and again to different groups of the same grade. So it's more lesson planning, but if you save it and kind of write notes at the end after each class and tweak it for the next time, just keep going, and eventually you'll be able to use them again. Talk to the parents and the students to discover what areas of interest they have. One of the neat things about these co-ops is there's often niche areas of interest. For example, I was speaking with somebody that I met through Facebook, and she said that she's teaching a class on chant. I was like, wow, that's great. So you'll find all kinds of little pockets of interest. Some advantages of teaching a homeschool group. You can teach outside the box. I keep saying that. Just you can do creative things that you would not really be able to do in public school. Students are generally more well behaved. They are parented. Their parents are usually very deliberate about teaching them, training them, so they usually have better behavior in the classroom. Even the co-ops tend to be more flexible. They typically have a shorter year. Oftentimes it's just 20 weeks a year. And there's more interest in niche areas. There are some potential challenges of teaching in a homeschool co-op, a homeschool group. One is, this is a big one, unclear or varying expectations. Sometimes these co-ops it just starts kind of organically, a grassroots movement. A couple families get together and they say, let's work together to school our kids and help them get a good education. And then it kind of grows and more people come, and then eventually morphs into something kind of big. And sometimes it's not really clear who's in charge or what the policies are or what the expectations are. Sometimes it's hard to find out what those are. Sometimes people, they don't even know. It's not like a set organization with a set steering committee or board. Other times there's a steering committee or some sort of overseeing group of leaders that provide direction to the group. But the expectations are not always clear. You have to really be deliberate in your communication. This is another big one, undiagnosed learning and behavioral needs. A lot of time, if you're homeschooled, you won't have access to testing like you do in the public school, but also the behavior or the needs of your child might not be as clear because it's just you and them. Or sometimes parents don't want their children to have a label, so they kind of purposely avoid that. So you might have a class of 15, 20 kids, and you come to find that, like, after working with them for a few weeks, you're like, okay, these 3 definitely have, they're on the spectrum or something, but the parents don't know, they haven't told you, or the parents are kind of avoiding. I think usually parents kind of have a suspicion that something's going on, but they don't tell you. And there's no IEP, or there's no direction on how to handle that or how to tailor the education for that child. So that's all up to you. There is often no or a very minimal budget. Some co-ops expect the teachers to volunteer or pay a very low fee. So be sure when you go in and you start, make sure you understand and that you've communicated what your expectations are, and you've heard what their expectations are. So how to tap into the homeschool community. The way that has worked really well for me is through Facebook groups. So if you join your local and community groups, for example, the name of your town, or the name of your school district, type those things in and find the groups for your area and join them. And then also you can join local homeschool groups. So search the name of your town or your county or your school district with the word homeschoolers after it. And oftentimes you have to answer some questions to be admitted into the group. But make sure you read the group rules before you post anything, especially advertisements saying that you are taking students or a flyer for your studio, because some prohibit that sort of thing and you can get booted from the group. Others say once a week you can, or, small business Sunday, or I don't know, they sometimes have rules about when you can post things like that. However, if somebody posts asking, hey, I'm looking for violin lessons for my child, does anybody know where I can get them? That is totally appropriate for you to jump in and say, hey, I teach, here's my flyer, and then anybody else can see it too. So that's a really great way to get the word out. If you're not on Facebook, another way to do it is to go online and search homeschool group near me. There's CHAP, is a Christian association, a Christian Homeschoolers Association of Pennsylvania. Different states probably have another association. And they maintain an extensive list. So basically get the names of different homeschool groups, get their email address or contact information, contact phone number, and reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a local music teacher. I have room in my studio. Is there any way I can get the word out to your community, your homeschool families, that I am available to teach? Sometimes they'll even say, hey, would you be willing to come and teach for us? Or you could even offer and say, hey, can I come in and do a one afternoon clinic as almost like a marketing for a marketing strategy. So reach out to whoever is in charge of these different homeschooling groups, and that's a great lead. All it takes is one connection with one homeschool family. Again, like I said, they tend to be amazing networkers. Once you get one, just wait, more will come. So here I'm going to give you two examples of different homeschool groups where I've taught. Community Homeschoolers Learning Group is the name of one. It's medium size, around 100 students, K to 12. It is a drop-off, which is a big win for a lot of the families. The moms especially appreciate that. It's 4 hours, 1 day per week, 10 weeks in the fall, 10 weeks after Christmas, like in the winter, spring. They have set classes and a set schedule for grades through grade 6. Once they get to 7th grade, they have 2 options for each period that they can choose from. In this situation, there's a steering committee that handles the logistics and pays the teachers as independent contractors. They don't take taxes or anything like that, so it's up to each teacher to claim that and deal with the tax ramifications. They take approximately 25 students per class, and there's a set enrollment price per student, around $300 a year, I think. And here it's kind of neat the way this has evolved. They have a paid parent on duty. They call it the pod table, that handles any behavior issues, first aid needs, sick kids, and they're right at the entrance, the doors, so they can monitor who comes in and out. In this homeschool co-op, I've been teaching there the longest. It's over a dozen years. I have a curriculum cycle that I've developed over the years. For grades 1 and 2, I use a pretty strongly Kodály-based instruction. Singing games, a lot of vocal exploration, focusing on steady beat, high-low, fast-slow, long-short, loud-quiet, instrument families, and quarter, half, and eighth notes and rests. 3rd and 4th grade, we build on that, kind of depends on the students, how far we go. And we add to that recorder karate and a Christmas concert in the odd years. And then the even numbered starting years, we do an elementary musical. 5th and 6th grade, we continue to building on the skills from the earlier in the elementary. And then on the odd years, we do ukulele karate and a Christmas concert in the spring, and then continue ukulele karate and Christmas concert in the fall and winter, and then continue with ukulele karate and add music around the world in the spring. And then in the even years, we do an elementary musical as well. For secondary, it's a secondary elective. on the odd years. So I do just kind of like a jam session, and sometimes I do a songwriting course where kids can come and learn to play by chord, play like in a band setting. And then on the even years, we accompany for the elementary musical. And the second example, there's a co-op called Teach. It's an acronym for something, I don't even remember what. This is a pretty large group, around 400 students, K to 12, that come on Tuesdays at a church. It's a one parent. Now this one, a parent must stay on campus and serve 1 hour, whether it be as a teacher's aide or kind of like security, or just stationed around the building, or set up or tear down. They have 5-hour-long classes 1 day a week. Some people come to just do one class. Some people do all 5 and everything in between. So this is a la carte. They meet in a church for 2 10-week sessions. There is the option for a third 10-week session for the high schoolers that need the credit hours. These classes are typically multi-grade or age, but teachers can set the age and grade limits for each of their classes that they offer. It's a la carte. There's many classes to choose from for each period. The volunteer committee handles the logistics, and the teachers can determine the minimum and maximum number of students to allow per class. And the teacher sets the price for the class, and the parents pay the teacher directly. So I can say, okay, I'm going to teach elementary chorus. I'm going to charge $40 per student, and I'll take a minimum of 12 students and maximum of 30 students, or something like that. And they'll work out the logistics for you. Any behavior issues are, because parents are there, you just send the child to their parents. In this co-op at Teach, some courses I've done is just a K to 2 music fundamentals, again, Kodai based, 3rd to 5, 5th grade music fundamentals. I add a lot more instrumental, boom whackers, things like that. Elementary chorus, beginner ukulele, musical instrument petting zoo that I referred to earlier, and this coming year I'm going to be doing an intro to guitar for worship bands. So the homeschool community is often untapped by a lot of music teachers, and there's a lot of homeschoolers out there. During COVID especially, it just flourished, and there are so many more homeschoolers than there used to be. So there's a lot of opportunity for us as private music educators. So I would encourage you to head down that path and see where it takes you.